Our next speaker will bring us a few hundred miles closer to our home planet to discuss another crucial interconnection, the one between our ocean and our climate. I'm so honored to introduce Hans Otto-Portner, is a marine ecophysiologist at the Alfred Wegener Institute Helmholtz Center for Polar and Marine Research, where he has developed groundbreaking theories on the impacts of ocean warming on marine life and ecosystems. As a member of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, he serves as co-chair of Working Group 2 and was, among other things, co-lead for the IPCC's special report on ocean and the cryosphere and a changing climate in 2019. We are very fortunate and honored to have such an expert deliver this keynote presentation on the ocean climate nexus. Everyone, please, a round of applause for Hans. Thank you so much. Lovely meeting you.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for this warm welcome, and thanks a lot for the opportunity to be here and talk to you about our findings with respect to climate and ocean. And it's a challenge. We've heard about hope. We've heard about the spiritual meaning of the ocean, but we've also, during the last panel, heard a little bit about the skepticism involved. And I think it's well justified. Because if there's hope, this hope needs to be realistic. And there's only a few years ahead of us where we will be learning whether our hope is realistic. We cannot stop fighting for climate, for stopping climate change, but we want to live in a livable future, and the ocean is part of it, and we do not want the ocean to degrade any further. Tides are changing, we've heard, but are they changing fast enough? This is a challenge that we are currently living through. To remind us, I will talk today about the ocean and the cryosphere, which still offer some of the most spectacular and beautiful sceneries on the planet. Climate change affects, however, 80% of the planet. It affects the ocean as a life-sustaining unit. And this is how the planet is evolving. We are approaching the 1.5 degree global warming that we would like to prevent us reaching if we look at the ambitious side of the Paris Agreement. The ocean is warming, but it's warming less than the land. And the important part of this, and you see this in the colors evolving here for the planet under 1.5, 2, 3, and 4 degrees warming. The reason is the ocean takes up more than 90% of the heat that the planet takes up. It has a huge capacity for heat, much better and much higher than the atmosphere. And it takes up about 30% of the CO2 that we are emitting into the atmosphere by our activities. So it's buffering human activities, buffering climate change at a cost. If we put what is happening in the context of our life expectancy, this is the picture we have here. You see that somebody who is born today will witness the changes that we are eliciting by the end of the century. And you see, based on this famous figure of the stripes, which shows how temperature and its variability have been evolving until now and will be evolving in the future. But this depends on our decisions now. What we do now defines the future of humankind and the planet. And the ocean is part of it. And here on this graphic, you see some challenges that are evolving. The ocean is warming because it's buffering the climate, and we even talk about marine heat waves now because we see how these heat waves are challenging marine life. The CO2 taken up by the ocean is causing acidification. The measure of acidity, pH, is declining, and it's a challenge for species that are building calcium carbonate shells or calcium carbonate ecosystems like the coral reefs. And then the warming ocean is losing oxygen, especially in those places where there are water layers on top of each other, where the ocean is stratified and the stratification is increasing. But then also there's one aspect to be considered that relates to the cryosphere. The ocean will take up all the water that is being lost from the cryosphere, from the glaciers, from the ice shelves, and it is also losing in the polar areas its coverage with sea ice. So these are the challenges ahead, and on top of that, we are putting our garbage into the ocean. We are using the ocean as a dumping site, and we've heard we are overusing its natural resources. A strong call for protecting the ocean, and sometimes you can only express this in the form of a comic. The ocean is part of global crises. Climate change, biodiversity loss, is part of our injustice and inequity in society. There is an uneven distribution of ocean resources, and there is pollution. And if we put that in relation to the challenging pandemic that we've just survived, then these challenges ahead of us have a different dimension and call it even more for action. And let's look at how oceans and marine life are being affected with a focus on climate change. And it's not all about us humans with respect to time. There are other creatures on the planet that live as long as us, or even longer, or even a little bit shorter. So they will also see the result of our decisions, and this graphic produced from our graphic in the IPCC reports by WWF is nicely illustrating. It has whales and it has corals, and looking at systems and their lifespans. And the corals are the most vulnerable ecosystem on the planet. They are special because they are an animal combined with a small algae, and such a symbiosis may be especially be sensitive to heat. And what is happening currently at large scale is that we are losing the life cover of those coral reefs, going from a healthy ecosystem to one that's bleached in the center, losing its algae, to one that is dead because it did not have the capacity to recover. And this is something you can observe from high up, you can observe from space, because it's large scale. It's a drastic change that started in the 70s. And our projections say that even in a 1.5 degree warmer world, there is a high risk of losing 70 to 90% of coral reefs and associated services to humankind, fisheries, coastal protection, food security, and there will be even more lost the warmer it gets. We are putting this into a risk assessment analysis using a color code, a burning ember diagram, which illustrates immediately, wow, the situation is that challenging and that risky. So we go from low risk white to medium risk yellow to high risk red and to purple, very high risk. And you see that even in a 1.5 degree warmer world, the warm water corals are on a demise. They have surpassed a tipping point, a planetary boundary, however you want to call it. And there are other systems that have a little bit more of a safety margins. And if we put the ocean systems together on this graphic, you see on the left-hand side the warm water corals in a high-risk situation at 1.5 and especially and even more at 2, but then other systems telling us we can still do something about the oceans to maintain the integrity of many ecosystems and enjoy their services. But there is a projection that is a real warning on the wall. In the tropics, the warming trend goes beyond the temperature threshold of tolerance for especially animals as the most complex or some of the most complex organisms on the planet. What you see here, depending on the degree of warming from a report we just released in March of this year, that there are spots on the planet, on land and in the ocean, where environmental conditions go beyond what organisms can adapt to. These environmental conditions are dangerous. This indicates that these organisms are reaching their evolutionary limits and indicate a loss of habitat. This should call for ambitious action, for stopping climate change at 1.5 to the utmost possible with whatever it takes. And the same is true for humans. We also live in an animal's niche, a mammalion's niche, because what I've said is valid on land and in the ocean. It's valid for all animal creatures, including us. We will also, according to that, lose resources in the tropics, in the low latitudes. Fisheries results will be declining, and this will hurt especially developing countries that rely on small-scale artisanal fisheries, and you see the brownish-reddish colors indicating a loss of fisheries result at the bottom, in the center of the planet, less at 1.5 and even more at +4 degrees global warming. But it's not just about the tropics, it's also about the poles. We see risks evolving there, associated with the drastic change in ecosystem structure. In the Arctic, especially sea ice ecosystems are collapsing. We are approaching conditions where we have an ice-free Arctic in the summer. Bird life in the Arctic is challenged, as well as in the Antarctic, already at 1.5. And that is what we are getting there. There will be, during the next 5 years, we are hearing from WMO, one of these years will go beyond 1.5 degrees global warming with a relatively high likelihood. So it's high time to act. Another challenge that we should be aware, and especially here on the North American East Coast, people should be concerned about, and that is sea level rise. Depending on the degree of warming, indicated here by the reddish and the bluish lines, either keeping warming at 1.5, the bluish line, or letting it go, which is a little bit the current situation still. Warming of the water causes expansion and contributes to an increase in sea level. And then we are losing the ice masses of the planet, the ice shelves, the glaciers. And each of these processes, in Greenland, in the Antarctic, and in the mountains, is contributing to sea level rise. And these projections come together to these numbers that you see here. If we keep global warming to 1.5, we may be able to keep a sea level rise to below 1 meter. If we let it go beyond, there will be several meters of sea level rise by 2300, and it's going beyond 1 meter already by 2100. And this is unstoppable. It's irreversible. It depends on the degree of global warming. We cannot refreeze the planet and put it all back in place. And there's uncertainty. There could be a contribution of the Antarctic to 13 meters of sea level rise by 2300 if we let climate change go beyond 1.5 degrees and even more. This is, I think, should be the strongest direct warning that you can imagine as it relates to the ocean. But the ocean also has extreme events. It has storm events. It has floods. And for centuries, humans know about the challenge associated with these extreme events, as you see from this Japanese painting here. And this means If these extremes are being put on top of sea level rise, storm surges that are challenging the coast, challenging the small islands, will become more frequent because they are building on a higher sea level. And the intensity of storms will be increasing, threatening 1 billion people by 2050 in low-lying coastal cities and small islands annually. Let me summarize these warnings. The science is clear for ocean, land, and human society, and we haven't even talked about the challenges on land. Any further delay in concerted global action on adaptation and mitigation will miss a brief and rapidly closing time window of opportunity to secure a livable future for all. Our reports not only talk about the challenges, but they also offer solutions to the world. However, it is getting late to implement them at full scale with the mentality of whatever it takes. And the political and societal will needs to be built for that. Thank you very much for your attention.